Hi, everyone. Julia here, recording this on January 11th, 2023. I'll get the year correct on this one. I'm having a hard time saying the correct year and date. And I have the beautiful Cheryl Bailey here, and Eugene describes your laugh as the beautiful witch laugh. and yeah, we were just talking a little bit about how her modality of the fear work via the calming bracelets and Michael Harrell's language lessons of the heart are really that next step that so many people need, especially people who have really been on that spiritual path and trying to get rid of fear and judgments and all that. And there's so many books to do this and ways, but for some reason they just haven't gotten to the crux of the matter. So I think these are the next step, and that's what Cheryl and I was just talking about, how these modalities are the next step for people. So there you go, Cheryl. I'll let you go since Biggie's bark.
Well, good morning, Biggie, and glad you could join us on the chat. We appreciate your attendance, and we're so happy to see you with us this morning. um, yeah, good morning, everybody, and I'm glad to be here to talk again. I always enjoy these talks that Julie and I are working on. I think that the information is information that is it's been out there for a long time, but we're just bringing it into a different format, because it's out of my personal experience in the process of my journey. And so, just pulling the information out of my story and, I think that would help people kind of piece together how their story works and how their process can work. I think that's, one of the reasons why I've always been willing to share my stories and what I've been through, because with these stories and these a new narrative, which is my narrative, it's not that it's all about me, it's about the story and it's about the process. Because I took the journey to work on myself, and I tried it all like everybody else has, and it just none of it was working until I started the process of removing my fear and my ego and my beliefs. And so that's the process I'm working, and I'm glad to be here again today to talk about it. And Julie and I were just talking about, meditation and, pathways, to your, your inner source. And I think that, without the understanding of what meditation and yoga and all those processes are for, what could happen, you get really good at meditating, you get really good at yoga, and then it's like, okay, now what? Wait, I've still got these issues that keep coming up. Okay, well, I'll just meditate some more. Well, they're still there and it's not going away, but I feel better, I'm more relaxed, and I'm moving forward, and I'm not in anxiety all day long. And so one day I was sitting in a conference and Tom was talking about this, and he said, this is what meditation and yoga does, is it focuses the mind. And he said, for you to be able to be effective at your process and working through your fears and your beliefs and your ego, you've got to be able to focus your mind, because your focused intent is how you do things here. It's how you manifest things. So he said, in meditation, after a lot, some practice, and you get better at it, and then you find yourself in a place that you find yourself in a place that's very peaceful and blissful. And Tom talks about this place as point consciousness. And at this place in point consciousness, you're basically just an awareness you're just floating in the void. And it is a very peaceful thing. It's calming, it's soothing. And, it is where you eventually arrive at once you practice meditation and yoga skills. And then he said this, he said, but that's the jump off point. He said in India cultures, the goal is to get to point consciousness. And there's even a name for it. I can't remember exactly what it is, but you get to point consciousness, and they call it's bliss. It's just where that's at. And And Tom said, well, one thing that was happening there is the bliss, the point consciousness. Well, that was the goal. That was the goal in, the Indian religions and teachings of meditation and yoga. The goal was to get to where you were in a blissful state while you were in meditation. And then Tom said this, he said, well, that's just when you've gotten to the point where you can focus your mind. He said, he goes, really, it's the start place. Once you get to where you can focus your mind in that way, and then once you get to point consciousness, that's where you start the work. Because once you get to point consciousness, then you can set your intention, take me to a place, where I can learn something. You're just saying this intention while you're in this meditative state, you're just in this bliss, you're floating along in the void, and then you use your intention and you say, I would like to see something that would help my growth. And then it'll usually, it happens really quickly. It'll like come in a flash, and you are connected to the system at that point. And then that's when you kind of walk through the door and you'll start seeing imagery. You'll start having sensations. And that's, I found that to be very true. Once I would get to point consciousness, and then I would set my intention to do something. I learned how to do this at the immersive. That's what, Tom Campbell teaches, is how to use your consciousness. So I'd get to I'd get to point consciousness. And I would hang out in the void, just floating in the void. And for me, it had this like purple color to it. It was a real soothing place. There was no problems. There was not anything going on. I didn't really feel my body at all. I'd kind of let go of that data stream, and I just kind of floating around there. And then I used the technique. It's like, okay. And I asked it a long time ago, and you can ask questions. It's like, well, is what I'm focusing on, is it going to work out, or how's it going to work out? Or, can I have more information around this? And then all of a sudden, bam, I was just in another place. So basically, point consciousness is the doorway into connection with the larger system, or the Akashic records, or whatever you want to call it, connection to the informed field. It has all different kinds of names, but it's just an information database. And so as I went into, this new space, that's when I had my first out of body experience. And I found myself on top of a roof, and I was Rudolph, and I looked down and I had Rudolph legs, and I had hoofs for legs, and it was the most vivid experience ever. And it was just like I was in, my day-to-day physical reality. So, I listened to what Tom was saying. It's like, oh, I see. That's just the doorway. And then once that door opens, you'll start getting, visuals. I would get things like, one time I got a Jack in the Box, and I asked for, more growth and healing. And then all of a sudden a Jack in the Box, but it was a big one where a whole grown person could fit into it. And it was a Jack in the Box. And I walked up to it, and Tom said, when something appears there, interact with it, do something, go play with the Jack in the Box, go ask it what it's doing there. You've got to engage it and kind of get a dialogue going for what's happening there. And so I walked up, and it was like the big crank on the side of the Jack in the Box started moving and going around. And it was doing the Jack in the Box thing, dun, 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 and it kept going. I was like, okay, this means one thing. Usually something's going to pop out of here. So I was just open and waiting to see what happened. And then all of a sudden, these two people pop out of this Jack in the Box, and it startled me in there. And I went, whoa, what are y'all doing in there? And I started interacting with the people. And then they started laughing because they scared me. And then they get out of the Jack in the Box and walked off. And I thought, okay, I'm going to get in the Jack in the Box now, because he said to engage with it. So here I am. So I get inside of the Jack in the Box, and then I could hear the crank turning. I was like, oh, I get it. Somebody else is coming up here, and then I'm going to do the same thing to them. And so I waited for it to end. And then when it popped open, I jumped out and went boo, and it scared. There was people in front of me, and it startled them. And then all of a sudden I had this thought. It's like, wait a minute, we're trying to get rid of our fear. I'm not supposed to be in here scaring people. And then I got out of the Jack in the Box and walked off. And that was the end of the, experience. And what I took away from it is, well, it's not good to scare people if you can help it. people already have enough fear as it is. Well, you don't want to scare people. You want, you want to try to bring in peace and harmony, not more fear, So, those experiences that I had, going into the point consciousness and then going beyond that, that was where it all was. And I got a lot of other data. I went to some other places, and then, Tom talked about once you go somewhere, you have access to that place. It's almost like it's a IPP or whatever, HT. It's like if you use Google, you put your location in there and then you hit the go and then you go there. Well, it's the same thing in this. You just bring up that, visual in your mind, or say it in your mind. I want to go back to where I was, and then bam, you're instantly there. It's almost like once you've been there, you can go right back anytime you want to. It's almost like you've got an address of somewhere you can go on the inner world, in the inner verse. And so I started working around with it, and I got a couple places that I was, able to go, and I learned a lot there. I end up one day at a log cabin out in the forest, and I walked up, and Tom Campbell was sitting there in a rocking chair, and I looked over at him. Excuse me. I look over, and there's Tom Campbell, of course. So I'm going to walk up and kind of interact with it and what's going on here. And I walked up, and it was Tom. Oh, hey, Tom, what are you doing here? How's it going? And he just looked at me, and he didn't say anything. He just looked at me and then looked back ahead. And then at that moment, the doorway to the cabin kind of creaked open. And I was like, okay, I get it. I'm supposed to walk through this door. So I walk through the door, I walk in, and then there's a table sitting there with my dad sitting at it, my deceased father. And I walked in, and I sat down across from the table. I was like, wow, so good to see you, Dad. It's been a long time. And it felt like him, and it was just so real. And so we were having a conversation, and, and we talked about some things and kind of moved through some things. And it was a really good interaction. And it really helped me. And so then I left, and as I left the cabin, I looked over, and there's Tom sitting there, and he's still just looking straight ahead. And I tried to interact with him again, and he really wouldn't. It wasn't like it was him. It was like it was not him, but he was just there or something. I don't know. Probably it was a scam to get me to go in there, into the log cabin through the dark doorway and go look at things, And then later on, as I was looking at that situation, I found that, okay, that's not actually Tom. That is just the system playing Tom. And it's just a thing there for me to interact with. It's not the Tom that I've met. No, it is just like almost like a connection to, me and my inner world and what's going on in there. And that I can ask this person that looks like Tom questions or whatever. But what I figured out is, like, I don't need Tom as my intermediary in between me and the larger system. Tom is not my intermediary. That would make him one of those priests that, kind of kept us away from the inner world for so long, and still does. I don't need Tom as my intermediary between me and the larger system. I have a direct connection with the system, a direct connection with my inner world and myself. So it was really interesting how, I kind of figured out that on our own individual journeys, that having gurus and having people that we learn things from is very good and very helpful. But at the end, it's you that's doing it, and they can't do it for you. So it's basically, you find the guru, you love them, they help you, but then the guru steps aside, and then it's your turn. You get in there and do it, because that's what you're here to do, is to work on your own process and do you. So yeah, the whole story about how in India, the arrival point that you want to get to is they called it, I think, nirvana, where it's that space where it feels good. And what Tom calls nirvana, it's the same thing as point consciousness. So once you get to point consciousness, that's where the jump off point is. Then you learn to, as you're meditating, because you're in a meditative state, you're in theta. It's kind of the state between awake and asleep. So you're kind of in that middle zone, and it feels kind of drowsy. It's kind of hard to think in that space. But what you do is you learn how to be more aware and more focused and aware while you're in that theta state. So there you are, you're in theta, and you're a little groggy, but you have to carry with you into the theta state before meditation. You want to think about what you want to accomplish, where you want to go, the things that you want to work on right then. And then you take that with you into theta state, and you've got to hold that intention, because it's going to try to slip away, and you might end up falling asleep, which Tom calls that clicking out. Well, you just clicked out because you got too far into theta and you just went on into sleep. So you don't want to click out. You want to stay with it, and you're just kind of, it feels like you're a little bit in molasses, and you're just kind of in a foggy, realization of awareness that, okay, I'm here. And as soon as okay, then you can feel it. Okay, I'm at point consciousness because I'm just feeling really good right now. All right, now I need to ask my question. And then you can ask a question, or, take me somewhere I haven't seen before, or any of that stuff. And then something will just appear. I've had balloons show up, Jack in the Boxes. One time I had a little river stream. It was a river stream, and then there was a raft right there. And it was like, well, just go ahead and get on the raft and see what happens. So I get on the raft, and I kind of lay down on it, and I can kind of see my feet sticking out in front of me. And then all of a sudden the raft started moving, and here we go. We're going down a raft, and we're just floating down the raft. And then I was like, oh, okay, so we're going on a journey. Here we go. We're on a raft on a river. And I was like, okay, well, let's go somewhere that I've been before or seen before, or something in here that I'd like to see, or something. So the raft comes around a corner, and then it parks at a stairway. And then I go up the stairway, and then it was all this old style megalithic concrete blocks, like the old maybe Tartarian architecture, where it was just all made of big giant concrete blocks. And then I walked up these stairs, and I look over, and there's on a table a big old platter of fruits and bananas and all kinds of snacks to eat. And I looked over and said, oh, that looks lovely, And then I turned and looked, and there was these 3 windows, and there was 3 people standing in these windows, and they all had these robes on. They looked like the Greek, the where they wore robes with a little tie around the waist. And it looked like 3 teachers, 3 old sages is what it looked like. And there they were. And so I went up, and I was like, oh, hi, how y'all doing? I like your robes. Your clothes are kind of cool. But they just stood there. They didn't say anything. They just stood there. Even though I was talking to them, I was like, okay, well, maybe they don't talk, I don't know what they're doing. But what I noticed about being in that place, it had a different vibe to it. It felt like a vibe of it had always been there, like it had always been this temple or something. And now that I'm looking back on that experience, Jason Bashirs was talking about a video about the oracles of Delphi. And the oracles of Delphi, they lived in a place like that, where they kind of would hang out underground in their own little places. And then they did these rituals I'm sure they were just clearing their mind. And I'm sure that they had learned how to meditate. And I'm sure that they were, just talking about things. And when people would come asking questions, and then they were just seeing where that person was at, and then give them information about themselves that they just can't get to, because they don't know how to meditate. They don't know how to get to point consciousness, and they don't know how the inner world works as a process to get somewhere. And so the oracles would speak, and then there would be these priests that would be, there with them. Then the priest knew how to translate what the oracles were saying, because sometimes it would just come out as gibberish, but the priest knew enough about the oracles, and they knew enough about what they were saying to be able to interpret the meaning and the story, and they could add to it. They wouldn't change the story, they would keep it whole in the vibe of what came through, but they would put more words to it, so that the people that came to hear the stories could understand what the oracle meant and was saying there. So all of it kind of happened over time. And we've had a couple of talks about being the seer and being the oracle. It's also being the witches, and I think that the term witches, it's kind of funny because, you know, it was demonized and turned into something that was negative and wrong and bad. And I think the only reason that happened is because, you know, the witches, the seers, the oracles, well, they were able to get access to the information where the priest was trying to insert himself between you and, you know, that source of the, you know, the inner world. And that's why they said, well, okay, God's over there and outside of you, there's nothing, you know, you don't even have an inner world. You know, everything that you know about is out here in this physical world, and you need us to help you determine what that is. So we're going to help you. But then when it's, you know, harvest time on your crops, you're going to have to go ahead and bring us 2/3 of your crop, you know, so that we can keep you on the right path, because, you know, you don't know what's going on. So, you know, we really need to help you here. And so I think that that priest inserted in between you and your inner world is what shut down a lot of people from being able to, you know, grow and learn here in this simulation, simulacrum, whatever you want to call it, because it, you know, denied you access to yourself. So, you know, as I was, you know, looking at that, and that was one of the reasons I don't really mind the witch term. I just, because it has a lot of negative connotation on it that some people have not teased apart and go, well, wait a minute. They were just trying to get them to shut up because they knew that it was an inward journey, and they knew where these records were, and they knew how to get to the data they needed. And so I kind of go with, I'm more of a seer. I'm a seer, and I can see into the informed field. I can see into the records, or whatever you want to call them. They've been called many different names, you know, and they call it going on a spirit journey, or, you know, really you're just going on a consciousness journey, because consciousness is primary. You know, the physical world we see around us is just a reflection of your consciousness. So the consciousness is primary, and you're really not going anywhere, because your consciousness isn't inside of your body. You can interchange soul and consciousness together. Your consciousness is not inside of your body, your avatar is inside of your consciousness. It's kind of backwards. And so what they're all describing, and all these myths, all these stories, all of it, it's just about the simulation, and the reality that we live in is a reflection of us. And we have access, we have inner access to consciousness, and we have all of these tools at our disposal. The system, it's aware of you. It is an intelligent system, but it's a neutral system. It didn't care either way what you're doing. It's just going to reflect back to you what you want. But you know, once you start gaining the knowledge and gaining virtues, gaining, you know, love and kindness, then what happens? It will step in and start assisting you, because the system is aware of you, and it wants you to succeed here. It wants you to be able to get rid of your fears and lower your entropy, because when you help yourself in doing that, you help the whole system in lowering its entropy too. So that's how we're connected to this, you know, to this reality that we're in. So when you have, you know, a system that's aware of you, and it's all about the inward journey. And, you know, I was talking to somebody else the other day about the hero's journey, and it's an inward journey. And, you know, you leave where you are. So if you think about consciousness, you leave where you are, you go through these trials and tribulations, and then you come back with a bag of goodies. And that's what Joseph Campbell talked about in his book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. It's a journey. He looked at all the myths all over the world. They all rose organically in different tribes all around the world, but it was the same story. How can that be? Well, because we're all in the same simulation. We're all in the same reality. Well, what everybody around the world found is this is a hero's journey. It's a journey of consciousness evolution. You're changing your consciousness from this thing to something else. And as you travel through this journey to yourself, and you get, you know, past those trials, and you slay those dragons, and you get rid of fears, and you get, you know, you get momentum in mastering your own consciousness, then that, you know, it leaves you in a different place than where you started. But also you come back with a bag of goodies in the story of the hero. You either come back with an elixir, there's always a prize that you have now that you can give to others. And then that is the, that's what's next on the hero's journey list, is to, disseminate those goodies that you've got in that bag with others, because then that assists them on their journey through their hero's journey through the simulation. And it gives another perspective on it, because talking about consciousness is very, very difficult, because consciousness is non-physical. So we've got to use metaphors and different languaging around it. It's very difficult to talk about. And so what we have to do is find different metaphors that, that point to, the gist of what we're trying to convey. So yeah, it's been quite the journey of learning what's happening here. And as far as, touching back on the oracles, and how Jason Brashear did a whole video around these oracles, and they were a real thing. This is documented well in all of the history, and they were there and they were doing it. But what I found interesting about what they were talking about, the oracles, if you Google it and look it up, there's the story that, well, here's what was going on. The earth was cracked and there was some fumes coming up out of the crack. And these women were smelling these fumes and they were getting high. And then they were talking, out of this, this altered state of consciousness. And I thought that was really interesting, in that they had to put that in the narrative of how they were doing it. They couldn't just say, well, they understood consciousness and they were doing it and they were connecting to the Akashic records and they were just bringing back information to tell people about. Well, that would be real convenient, if y'all were a priest, trying to get in between, the seers and the people, and telling the people that you don't have these kind of powers. You can't do this. Well, the only reason that they're able to do it is because they're going down and smelling these fumes out of this crack in the ground. Now, I wouldn't be opposed to thinking that they may have had some, some kind of elixir in their cup that maybe had a little bit of, entheogens in it, because I can see where entheogens can open up your mind to more, the bigger reality that we normally can't see, because our avatars and our minds are kind of a system to keep all of the data from coming in all at once and blowing out all our circuits. You have to work at this a little at a time, because it can become way too intense. So I think that these women who were called the oracles, the seers, I think that they were very adept at their, going in. They were good at meditation. They understood yoga and all this stuff. They would go in, they would focus their intention, they would get to the point consciousness, and then they would ask the question that person was wanting to know from there. Then they would say, okay, larger system, this king standing in front of me, he wants to know if his army's going to get demolished in this next war he's got coming up, or what's, he just wants information around that. Then she would just go with her consciousness, get the information, come back, and then, say what she saw. And a lot of times it's allegory and it's in metaphors. And then that's where you had the priests, where they were kind of explaining, what the different allegories usually mean when, the oracles were getting information and bringing it back. And, and there's one more thing I'd like to say about that too, is, people who are able to channel. I have seen people who do have this ability. I went to a live event with a channeler by the name of Abraham Hicks. I went to a live event with my 18-year-old nephew, and I wanted to see what's going on there, because I was just super curious of how in the world is this person doing this, and what are they doing? It was before I found Tom Campbell. And so there I am sitting in this chair, and then there's my little nephew sitting next to me. He was 18. And, I told him, I said, yeah, well, she picks people out of the audience and you can go up there and sit in the hot seat, and so he was all excited about it. And all the way there, he was telling me, I'm going to sit in the hot seat. I said, oh, you are? I said, well, okay. Well, I hope you do. It sounds like fun to me. And so we're sitting there, about the third question in. I'll be darned if Abraham Hicks did not pick my nephew. And she just pointed right at him. And he was just so excited because, see, he had the belief and the intention that he was going to get in the hot seat. And he was only 18. He didn't have the belief that he couldn't sit in the hot seat. And there he went, right up on stage and was sitting in the hot seat. And now I have to say that the vibes in the room when I was in there with Abraham Hicks were very similar to point consciousness. It felt very peaceful. It felt very calm. And that's what I think was going on. Abraham Hicks is very, very good at focusing her intention. She was a long-time meditator, and that she was just going into the Akashic records and getting data. But see, here is the hitch with the channeling piece. And I'm not saying they're doing anything wrong. I'm not saying anything negative about people who have these abilities, because they do. And all it is, though, is each person, when you go into the larger system, you go into it with all of your thoughts, all of your beliefs, all of your fears, all of your stuff. You're going in there with all your stuff. So when you get the data, you have to interpret that through your lens. It's not the actual thing that they got. You're just interpreting it. So you're seeing this event, you're looking at, what you're seeing in the, in that space. So you're looking at it, you bring back the metaphors. Well, that metaphor could mean one thing to you, and then it could mean another thing to somebody else. So see, that's what causes channeled information, that it cannot be 100% accurate, because it's being filtered through the lens and filtered through someone else's consciousness with all their stuff in it. So they could misinterpret the meaning of the metaphor, the meaning of, what they saw in that space. It may not be 100% accurate. And that's why you have to just, take what you can use from it, but then, take the meat off the bone and then throw the bone out, because some of it's not accurate. And if it doesn't resonate with you, you just need to go, I don't know. And that's why it's not good to, follow what other people say just blindly, because they're interpreting the data too. And they may have a different interpretation for it. And so, and as those different interpretations come through, one of the things that Abraham Hicks had interpreted was she would talk about, well, if you have a negative feeling, well, it's because, you are not vibrating in the right place, and you need to just get yourself into a better feeling place. You need to think better thoughts and get yourself, because you're just you're feeling negative, and so it's manifesting out in your reality. She did say that, but instead of calling it what it is, well, you're just, you're encountering your own fear. What happened was, Abraham Hicks' interpretation of it was, well, that's just contrast. It's just telling you what you don't want. Well, it is telling you what you don't want, but you can't get what you want because you've got a fear around that. Well, if you've got a fear around something, you can't manifest any of it because you're afraid of it. Well, I'm afraid of that. You can't change any of it because of your own, consciousness is afraid, or it has a belief around something that you can't have it, or something like that. So, when I went through the Abraham Hicks material, there was another channeler named Seth. And I've talked about that one too. And I've read everything they said too. And I got a lot of good information there, but some of it was just way out there. It didn't resonate with my story or what I had experienced. And I thought, wow, that's really out there, but I don't know about that. So I'm going to set that over to the side, and we'll just leave that for later. I don't even know about that. And so I was able to take with me, the parts that was helpful, but then the parts that weren't helpful, like, well, that's just contrast. That was not helpful, because I did try that. Okay, I would encounter a fear, and then I'd work myself into a better feeling place. And then I felt better. But then the contrast that I just had would just circle right back around and show up, a few days, a few weeks, or a month later. And then there it was again, same thing. Different day, different faces, but it was the same fear because it felt familiar. And I was like, okay, well, that's contrast. And then it's like, I don't know about that. So as my nephew was sitting up in the hot seat, he asked Abraham Hicks, well, what about copyright information? Can I tap in and channel someone else's copyrighted information? And because he's a musician and he liked music, and he wanted to be able to tap into the source of where that inspiration came from, because he wanted to feel that too, because he enjoyed it as an artist. And then Abraham Hicks says this, yes, you can tap into other artists and you can tap into the story of where they are. And yes, you can do that. He goes, now you can't, tap into their work and then, resubmit it for publication because it's copyrighted. He says, oh, but I can still kind of get the vibe and then make up my own thing, right? She goes, of course you can. And so he said, so there is a way to get around the copyright infringement. And I'm sitting there and I look up and I noticed that Abraham Hicks was kind of a little off center there. And I was like, what's going on there? And me and my nephew talked about it later. And in Abraham Hicks's work, she never, ever publishes the conferences that she does. She never publishes the video. Well, after you go to one of those conferences and then your cute little 18-year-old nephew gets up in the hot seat, you would love to watch that interaction again. I mean, you would just love to relive it and revel in it and laugh at it, but you can't. The only thing you can get to is the auditory. You can go find the auditory. They will release that part, but there's no visual data. They won't release it because it's copyrighted and it's not shared with other people. And what my nephew had done was walked up, got in the hot seat, identified one of Abraham's fear of not having enough, losing the money on the material that, they weren't publishing. So they were afraid they were going to lose their money, lose, income and all of that. So see, because of those fears, it wouldn't allow them to release the visual data, which would not have changed anything. They would still be a multi-million-dollar enterprise because Abraham Hicks is a very good, seer, can look into the records and can give you really good information. But you've got to be able to go through it and know that it's being interpreted by her, and it's being interpreted through the lens of, there may not be enough here. And so we've got to hang on to all of our, all that we produce and not let that out into the world because we might lose money here. And my nephew just kind of touched on, I just touched on the fear of the whole Abraham Hicks enterprise. And we didn't realize that's what it was till much later on, and all my nephew had done was just touched on Abraham Hicks's contrast, Abraham Hicks's fear of not having enough. And, oh, we've got to, now I think copyright and all that is a good thing to protect an artist's material. But I think if you hold on to those goodies that you bring back to people, if you hang on to it and you don't share some of it, well, then you're doing yourself and others a disservice, because that's going to make them want more of you, want to, interact with you more, and yes, some of it needs to be copyrighted. Somebody can't go out and reproduce a song that you wrote and just redo it in a different format and then put it out there like it's yours. Well, that would infringe on your property. So I just think if you take that too far, though, then you're withholding things that you could share with other people. And I'm not saying Abraham Hicks is wrong or anything. Abraham Hicks helped a lot of people into, start dealing with this inner world that we have. I think it was a good step off point. And then Tom Campbell came along. It's like, well, those fears. And then I went, oh, I get it. Those fears, that is contrast in Abraham's work. It's contrast. Well, the contrast is fears. Well, if you just skip over it, you can't get to the fear because you're just skipping right over that part and moving on. And that's why it's still a flat tire coming up over and over and over again. You can't get rid of it. And so that contrast just keeps on coming and you're not getting rid of it. And, a few days later, my nephew said, I didn't mean to push on, on one of Abraham's buttons there. And I said, well, you couldn't help it because it was there. Because, and it was going to come up because you and I wanted to watch it, but then we couldn't. And we still to this day have not been able to see the video of that special day there with Abraham Hicks with my nephew. So I thought it was really interesting how I, went there and saw what was going on. And it's really interesting how a lot of people, it's like, oh, channeling, that's just all, bunk and it's no good and this and that. Then you have other people, oh, these channelers, they're light beings and they're doing this thing. And it's like, well, the channelers and the light beings, well, they do have talents. They do have abilities. They have abilities to focus their consciousness. They have ability to go into the larger system. They have ability to go get these records, but it is through the lens of their consciousness and who and what they are. So, when you look at something like that, you're looking at something that came from the larger system that has been interpreted through another consciousness. So you're getting kind of the secondhand news. And I think that's the goal for everyone is, get that middleman out of the way, because you have these abilities as a consciousness. And, once you get yourself focused and you can meditate, and it doesn't have to be meditation, meditation, you say meditation these days, like, oh no, I don't have the patience for that. I can't do that. You can do a walking meditation. And Julia does a lot of those. She'll be walking in her forest, and that's Julia in the theta meditative state. And she's just bringing to you what comes up. And it is a connection to the larger system. You can feel it. You can feel the vibration of it. It feels good. And so you've got a walking meditation. You've got yoga. Yoga is a kind of a postural meditation. Anything that where you're focused on one thing, that you're doing. Running is, it's not good on your knees, but if you just run just a little bit each day, that's a good meditation too, because you can pop yourself right in to a meditative state that way. And that meditative state, people call it flow. It's when you're in the zone. It's when you feel your best, when you're doing exactly what you want to do. And so, yeah, that's my story about meditation and point consciousness. So how are we doing, Julia?
That is so cool that you had so many experiences like that. And I think a lot of people really want those experiences. And of course, if they're trying too hard, they get frustrated. And Tom Campbell's always saying, you don't have to do any of that. You can just work on being love, and that's enough. You can just know all this. But, he also says if it's not your truth, then if it's not your experience, then it's not your truth. So it's an opportunity for people to realize and prove to themselves that there's more to this than, the materialists tell us, that it's just all, bumping particles, as Ken Wheeler likes to say. And Ken Wheeler just did a video about the oracles too. So that's cool. It's funny how things get in the ether like that. One person thinks of something and then other people do it too, not, in small groups and, collective wide. So there's just so much magic going on. And I like how you were saying how point source is, just the stepping stone, Tom Campbell's always saying that. And so those people who are really good at meditating, man, take that next step, go have some fun. And a lot of times it is just fun. And you can always find lessons, but maybe not always. Sometimes it will just be fun. And Tom always warns that there will be fear tests. So watch out for the boogeyman when you're doing that kind of thing. But there's nothing to fear. Like, Saul was saying the other day, which you're talking to him tomorrow, right?
Yes, I am.
We all get out alive. So, you can go play. And I like how you brought up the other ways, instead of just sitting there, with your legs crossed, meditating or whatever, your eyes closed, getting to that point source consciousness. You can also do the imagination way, right? Like with Tom's new project called Tom's Park, where instead of using meditation to get to that jump off point to go have fun in the astral, use your imagination. And you just kind of, and you can do it without his book, right? You just start thinking of some scenario in your mind. You're doing something somewhere, and it just gets to a point where it takes a life of its own, and you're no longer really like, saying, well, I do this, then I do this. So there's so many ways to just kind of get in that state, because I'm not like Cheryl. I can't just go to these places, and I believe all the people that say they do that. Not all of them, because there are a lot of posers out there, and a lot of people, they hear that somebody else does something like, oh yeah, I do that too. So, and like I said before, when you get really authentic and you've done your work, you can kind of tell who those people are, and it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. But if you really want to do
No.
it, have that opportunity. And it sounds like Cheryl's ready to run her own in immersives now. You got such good advice for that. And I'm sure getting in, having all those people in the same place together. Wow. Because that's how it was with my biofield tuning classes. Just that energy of all those types of people coming in there and coming together, basically a coven. And so just, having that power of everybody's intention together, it's got to be a really cool vibe. So yeah, that's great information and really fun stories.
Well, yeah. Well, Julia, well, you're gonna have to invite me up to one of your, do a little retreat, and then I'll be there in March, so you might as well get started on that. So where we can come up and we can do a little retreat for a few days and do some fun things, and then I'll just blast off again. And I really like what you brought up about imagination and using your imagination to to interact with the larger system. If you are a creative intuitive, you're going to have an easier time with this. But for the left brains who are more linear, logical, rational thinkers, y'all can go to Tom's park. And Tom has built a park that strengthens your imagination abilities so that you can then use your imagination, get out of that left brain. And that whole thing, that's what it's for, is for the left brains to learn how to do it. And, for the imagination piece, what happens is if I'm glad you mentioned it, because I kind of left that part out. We all need to know about this one. So if you are an intuitive artistic type, then you can use your imagination. What you do is you visualize yourself in the imaginative world. And one of the examples that Tom gave was you put yourself on the back of an elephant. So you're sitting on the back of an elephant, and you kind of feel the sway of the elephant. You see the top of the elephant's head come up. And I always see the blanket that they would put over the elephant, underneath the seat, and had all these little Indian tassels of all pretty colors hanging off of it. You just make that imagination just as vivid as you can. And then just stay with that image. And then you're just rocking back and forth on the elephant. And then that gives the system a chance to hook into that imagination. And then it just takes off on a direction on its own. The other day I was doing that, and I do the elephant one a lot. So I was, and a lot of times I can put my feet in a Epsom salt bath, and something about salt is you can get connected easier to the system too. I think that's where the whole put a circle of salt around something got started, because I think it's just something that interacts with your consciousness. I don't know what's going on there. I have no idea. But so I'll put my feet in the salt bath, and then I'll imagine this little elephant, and here we go off on our little road. There's this little tassels, and I'm sitting on this seat. And then all of a sudden, up to my right or something, I'll see a stair going down, or I'll see a flower, or I'll see something somewhere, and then I get off the elephant and go, and that is the jump off point into the larger system. That flower, then I'll open up into a scene I'm in, where I'm interacting with other people and doing different things. And we're talking about all kinds of things that, I don't talk to about it with anybody, because to me, it's just bananas, but it's probably not bananas. I just don't understand it yet. Who knows? So that's the story about, your imagination can hook you into the larger system too. You don't have to go the meditation, walking, or, that route either. You can go directly into your imagination, and that's why your imagination is so powerful. And, once you get in there, the thing about once you start tapping into the larger system, you got to understand that when you go into the larger system, you're taking you with you, because you are it is you. So when you take yourself in there as a part of consciousness, you go in there, well, there's a potential that your fears can manifest in there. And there are built within the programming of the system fear tests, because it's aware of you. The system knows where you're at. And so it'll give you a fear test just to kind of check and see where you're at, because it doesn't want you to go too far into the system, because then you could really scare the heck out of yourself if you had a lot of fear. Well, it doesn't want you to do that. It doesn't want your consciousness damaged in any way. It just wants you to get from it the experiences that you need. Well, if you're not opened up enough yet to take in all this new data, it can be quite overwhelming. And I think that's where you get some of those, Kundalini blowouts, or whatever they call it, It was just too much at once. So just take what comes, and If you find yourself in there at some point and then a fear test comes up, then you can, the best way to look at it is like to expect it. Okay, there might be a fear test in here because the system wants me to see where I'm at. It wants to see, how much fear do you have in your system? What are you working with, And so I got a couple of fear tests before I was able to do more in the system. In the very beginning, I wasn't able to do that much. It was very vague. I couldn't see colors in there. It was just kind of blurry. And then I got these 2 fear tests, and the best thing to do while you're in there is you just take your courage with you. And then if you see something crazy, then you look at it and go, ha ha, I know what you are. And then you laugh at it. You don't succumb to it. You overcome your fear. And, people have seen all kinds of crazy things in there that have scared them. And I think that's one thing why people see hell sometimes when they, either have a near-death experience or they get ready to cross over. Well, if you've been afraid of going to hell your whole life, well, that's what the system's going to show you because you believe it, And so, but a lot of people, they go into the hell, but then there is a way there that they can get themselves out of it. It doesn't just like throw you in there and keeps you there. And a lot of the stories, you'll hear them. Well, and then this other person showed up and said, I just needed to be a kinder person and I needed to work on these virtues. And then the next moment I was in this space with this really cool, entity or whatever. So it doesn't leave you in the hell that you created in your mind and your fear body. It doesn't leave you there, because it's aware of you. It knows you. And, source is not out to get us. The world is not out to get us. We're just here to grow. This is like this is a training course for consciousness, and we're trying to learn how to use our abilities. We're trying to go on the inward journey so that we can, inform our consciousness and then be able to do more and be able to help ourselves and others more, to be able to love more, to be able to get rid of those fears, because it is the journey. As you take this journey, what you're doing is you're evolving your consciousness. Then when you come back the next time, you get to start out where you left off. You don't have to start over at square one. See, and that's why I don't think it's a soul trap. If it was a soul trap, you'd just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. But if it is not a trap, then you would get to start where you left off. Then you get to progress and evolve from there. Well, do I want to start out in my next life where I started out in this one? Well, no. I would love to start out where I leave off. And what, you don't take with you all of the facts and figures and the knowings. What you take with you is the quality of your consciousness, which is how much love you have, how much fear you have. So if you have lots of fear, you're going to come right back into another fearful experience until you figure it out. But if you take love with you, and you have worked through a lot of your fear, you're going out with a lot more love than you came in with. So then your next lifetime, it's going to have all of that love encoded in it. So you just changed your reality, yourself, you're doing it. And so that's why I don't think it's a trap, because what a wonderful opportunity as a consciousness for me to be able to grow and become more. And as a consciousness, I am what I am. I've just found myself here like the rest of us did. And so in learning how to, work with the fears and work with myself and get rid of these, hindering beliefs that I have, and working that ego out of the way, because ego's not your amigo, it's not your friend, getting rid of that person there, and then coming to yourself and then learning how the system works and all that. Well, what happens after you do that, when you come back in again, you're going to have a propensity. You're going to have a propensity to be able to meditate easier because you just did it a whole bunch in your last few lifetimes. And I know that I was meditating a lot in my last lifetime, so I didn't have to meditate a lot in this one. I was able to get to point consciousness pretty easy. And it was easy for me because I think it's because I'd evolved my consciousness in some of my previous lifetimes, because I was able to look at a couple of my lifetimes, and I was able to go back and find the evidence that corroborated that narrative, that is probably who I was. And in one in particular, I meditated every single day the world turned for hours. So, but see, I was getting to point consciousness and I wasn't going any farther. But that could have been just my practice to learn how to get to point consciousness in that lifetime. Then when I came into this lifetime, okay, now I know how to get to point consciousness. Now I'm going to get in there and start, working with my consciousness and doing the things that my consciousness can do without the middleman, without the guru, just my direct connection with source, with myself as a whole human being. And I don't have a twin flame out there that I'm looking for. I'm whole within myself. I'm not saying anything bad about the twin flame theory, and I can see how it could be valid in some ways. But as far as when you're a consciousness working here, you are an independent, because you are it. You are a piece of consciousness. You're not the whole thing. You're a part of the whole thing. And so it is you, and you are it, and you work with it. It's like that thing of playing hide and go seek, and those self-realizations that you have as a consciousness. Well, then it's like a flower that opens up to a whole new landscape that you're on, and it's not where you've been, and it's something new, and there's a whole different kind of variety of flowers in that garden that you can explore. And all this time you're working on your virtues and getting rid of that fear. Well, as you're doing that, you've got this garden, right? Well, this garden just gets more and more and more beautiful as you work on it. Then others can come up and look at your garden, and they can't come in and be your garden, because you can't help someone else grow up, but they can look at your garden and go, wow, that's a beautiful garden. I'd like to plant some of those flowers in my garden, and that's how we affect other people. It's, by living and being your authentic self, and by being the change that you want to see in the world. And this is how that works and how that helps people. And that's all you have to do, because we really can't change anybody else anyway. They are on their own journey. They have their own individuated unit of consciousness that they are, and that is who they are. They're doing their part. I'm doing my part, and it's separate from that. So, if someone comes up next to you and their garden is just kind of got weeds all in it, it's kind of sort of a mess. Well, you don't want to look over there and go, your garden looks terrible. And no, you can't look at my garden because, yours looks terrible. And you don't get to play near my garden because I've worked hard on this garden, so you better get away from it, Well, a more kinder thing to do would be allow that person come look at your garden and see what that's like and be around you. And then, their garden is a mess and they've got a few dark uglies in there. They're growing a bunch of thistle, and they come up to you and they're standing there dripping in their fear, and they're uncomfortable as they can be. And they try to project that uncomfortableness on you. But see, that it's not you, and that's about them, and they can't help it. And so you just look at them in compassion, and then you look at your garden, and then you look at them and you go, you too can have your very own garden that you like too. And so because you're, cultivating your own garden, it gives others the power. It gives them drive. It gives them, hope. And it gives them hope that, oh, I can make a garden like that too. And, even if they come up and try to steal your garden, which they're going to try, there might be some envy involved there. It's okay. Just let that be, because they're going to figure out that they can't come up and take your garden over. And it just doesn't work like that. And if they kick you in the shin, your garden's better than mine, correct? Well, you just, you let it be what it is about them. That's their problem, and it's not yours. And you can look at them and say, oh, that must be uncomfortable. You want a pretty garden too. And I don't blame you, because I used to have a garden a garden of weeds too, and it just wasn't very fun. I didn't enjoy working in my garden because it was not fun. It had bad things in there. It had a bunch of dark uglies, and it had hobgoblins jumping around in there, and gophers coming up and eating anything I did grow. And so, yeah, I don't, that was not a fun place to be in. So I'm going to have compassion for you, and I'm going to look at it through the eyes of love instead of fear. Oh, they're trying to get something from me. They want my garden. No, you can't have it. It's mine. Because then I'm looking at it from a scarcity point of view too. And you just have to see it for what it is, because there are people of all different varieties here. Some have evolved in great ways and in meaningful ways, and others have not. They're still I look at it like, oh, there's a baby consciousness. Oh, they're trying, they're here, they're doing it. And it's a struggle when you don't know a lot. So they're, oh, look at them. They're taking the first step. Oh, they're going to bobble. Oh, they caught themselves. Oh, look at them learn how to walk. It's a beautiful thing. And I'm not going to pick up a rock and throw a baby consciousness and throw it at them and hit them in the head with it and knock them over. They're already falling over all over the place as it is. And I don't want to be, that rock that comes at them and knocks them down. I want to be something that's standing on the other side of it with my arms out, with my hands out, going, come on, you can do it, like you do with a little baby that's learning how to walk. Well, you don't go over and shove that baby into the coffee table. Oh, well, if I shove it and make it fall down, it'll get better at getting up. No, you don't want to do that. You want to put your arms out, even though that little toddler's walking around getting into everything you own, smearing your lipstick all over the mirror. It's doing all these crazy things in your house. You want to put your arms out and, oh, come on, baby, you can do it, and revel as it's taking its first steps. And so that's one thing that, I always have in the front of my mind. It's like, oh, let's not throw rocks at the baby. And then it's like, oh, well, they just stomped on my toes. Like, well, yeah, but it's fine. I'm no worse for the wear. It's not about me anyway. And so what can I do to help? Can I go over to the baby that's face planted? Can I pick it up? Can I give it a hug? Can I ask it for more information of why they're upset? Maybe there was a misinterpretation of the data. Maybe I can clear that up and say, oh, well, that's not what I meant in that interaction. This is what I meant. Or if you really did make a mistake and you hurt someone's feelings, you can say, you know what, around this subject, I may have some fears around that, and just be honest and authentic, and then tell them what could have happened within you in that moment. And you know what? You would be shocked at how people interact with that if you really own who you are, own what you do, and you tell them, well, I did this, and it was out of my stuff, and it had nothing to do with you, and I apologize that my actions made you feel in an uncomfortable way, and I apologize. So, as you get on down the road, I was able to do this more and more because my fear was leaving, and my lower self-esteem and the things I thought about myself was getting better. I didn't see myself as causing other people great harm. I saw myself as someone here trying to grow up too, and that changed a lot of those negative interactions that I was having, because I would see someone with a beautiful garden, I'd get a twang of that envy. Oh, because I'm over here in my mind that is kind of like a tornado running through everything, and it's banging around in there, and I'm super uncomfortable. And, while in the outside world, there's this just peaceful thing happening, but I can't see it because I'm in this tornado banging around. And, I wanted out of that too. I didn't want to be in there. I wanted to be over in that pretty garden where it looked like fun and a peaceful place to be. So yeah, it's just a process of, working through your stuff and getting rid of the fears. And it's just it's a beautiful thing. Don't you think, Julia?
For sure. And what happens, regardless of how you get rid of your fear, when the fear leaves, it leaves space for something else, and that something else is love. And that's the ultimate goal, is to be love. And whether it's us returning to love or just becoming love for the first time, I don't know. And that's what I really like about Tom Campbell, because that's always been his premise is, we just want to try to be love. And the more shadow work you do, the more fear work you do, and you get right with yourself, and you have that honest self-awareness, like you can go apologize if you need to, that's a huge one. um it just it radiates around, and you automatically don't don't judge other people. You just, the way Cheryl was saying how she handles things now, that's just the natural way when you get to that point, because you see it from a whole different perspective, because not only do you have this more keen self-awareness, you have more keen awareness of everything, and even if you're not able to do all this out of body stuff, so to speak, and whether it be imagination or meditation or whatever, you'll still get to this really like high place. I don't know how to explain it, where you just, I don't know, you get in that flow, like you said, you get in that flow state. And yeah, it's just becomes effortless if you do enough work on yourself. You'll just automatically get into that flow state.
Yes, you will. In that flow state, you don't have to have gotten rid of all your fear to go there. You don't have to be, a pure consciousness to be able to get to that point consciousness. We all have that ability as consciousness to do that. And I think that people see it in all different ways. Some people can listen to music and it takes them right to point consciousness, right into flow state where everything feels all right. And, there's no worries, there's no problem in that moment. They just go with the music and they flow with it. And because a lot of times whoever, whatever artist created that piece of music, that's where that music came from, their flow state. And so you can just kind of piggyback on their flow state, and it just kind of trains your mind to get into its flow state. And, like Julia was talking about, as consciousnesses, individuated units of consciousness, when we group up together, it's that two heads are better than one. You've got a more powerful energy at play now. Now you've got more consciousness involved and focused in a certain way. And that's what gives it the power. It's the power in numbers. And I think that's part of why, in the system, people kind of team up together, and then it's like, okay, we're on the in club and you're in the out club. We tend to do that too, which isn't healthy. But it's just an old instinct that we have, that, if someone that doesn't, look like us or act like us is moving in towards our tribe, that means that we're being invaded and we're in trouble. And so we need to look at that as a threat. Well, we don't live out in nature and, tribes anymore. So we don't have that problem anymore, but we still have that instinct to look out there and say, okay, are you in or are you out? And so that's just an instinct that, once again, we can override these instincts that we developed over, time of, being a human being, and, embedded within a family, embedded within a culture, embedded within, the bigger culture. You can go and you can work through, some of those instincts that we have to, to judge others, because we do have that instinct. Well, if something is very different than me and it starts coming into my reality, well, that could potentially be a threat. And back a long time ago, it was a threat, because that meant they're coming to get your stuff. They're coming to get your stuff. They're coming to get your women. They're coming to get your kids. And that's kind of what we went through as a species of Homo sapiens. The men had a big job. They had to protect the women and the children, and they were expendable crew members, and they got killed a lot. And, the women and children were protected because that was, valuable. That was because the more people you had in your tribe, the better you could defend yourself from outside forces. And so as your tribe grew, you had more and more women, more and more children. Then you had more and more men that were born into the tribe. Then those men could then stand up and protect the tribe from outside forces. Then the men also, because women were usually pregnant all the time, back in our early, species as we're walking around, they were either pregnant or having babies. That's what they did. The women had the babies, and the men protected the women and children. And the men also would do a big part of the hunting for the women, because a pregnant woman running trying to catch something is not going to work very well. They were more gatherers. They would gather, they would garden, and they would gather, berries and stuff from the nature around them. And then the men were the ones that were doing the heavy lifting. They were going out and doing this dangerous work of catching food to eat. And I'm sure that after any particular hunt, every now and then a few of them just didn't make it back to the tribe, because the prey got them, because these prey, if you think about it, they had defense mechanisms. They had big giant horns, They were bigger than the humans. Here we are, these humans, we don't have no protection. We're soft and squishy. And, we didn't have like these big fur coats. We didn't have a antler rack that we could run at them with, because they hunted with spears first. They didn't have any, weapons to be able to, help assist with these hunts. So they were very, very dangerous. And they were the expendable crew member, because the women and children were protected at all costs. So the women were not expendable crew members. They would go on to live, and say, for instance, if their husband got killed on a hunt or in a war with a neighboring tribe that wanted your resources, then, their husband got killed. Well, see, that would put the woman in a very, desperate situation, because now her and her children are not being provisioned, because the other husbands were provisioning their wives, And so if that woman lost their husband, then she would have to take a new husband, because without, someone helping provisioning you as a female with children, well, you and your children are going to die. Yes, the tribe would share with you, but in times of where it was scarce and there wasn't really enough going on because we couldn't go to the grocery store, well, say, for instance, you got in a squabble that week with somebody and they weren't happy with you, and then their husband brought home a big, thing of food for their family. Well, they might give you a little piece of it, but they're not going to just share all of it, because they're trying to conserve for their family too. So yeah, you would have to be able to keep going. And I think that that's part of what our instincts are, and I just kind of rolled around some of our instincts as, we had roles of what the men do and what the women do. What we did is we specialized, where each individual didn't do everything. The women would have the babies and they would be focused on the inner world of children and relationships. The men were focused outward into the physical world, and they would focus on, hunting, and they had to be able to focus down onto one specific thing, and so that they could shoot that arrow and hit that target. Well, women were not focusing on one thing at a time. They would have 3, 4 children that they're dealing with. Their focus was more of a broad focus on everything that was going on in the room at the same time. That's why I'm not saying all, but the big, on the most part, the women can be very good at multitasking and doing 3 or 4 things at the same time. And most of the time, men just aren't real good at that. They're focusing on something, and that's what they're doing. They're focusing there because that's kind of how their consciousness evolved, and so they're sitting there. And for instance, I can put an example of this. You've got the husband in there is watching a game, and mom's in there making some goodies for the kids, or vice versa. And the woman goes in there and says, "Hey, honey." Well, he's focused in on the game. He's not trying to ignore you. His focus isn't there. He doesn't even know you're there. He's focused in on one thing and one thing only. And so what I do around my house when my husband is focused on one thing, now I know what it is. Oh, well, he's just using his powerful focus, and he's focused on that thing over there right now. So if I really need his attention, I'll wait and I'll walk around in front of him and I'll get his eyeballs. And that's what I call it. I'll get his eyeballs and I'll say, "Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt your time with your deal here, but I need this right now. And if you could help me, I would appreciate it." And usually he does. Sometimes he says no, because he knows that sometimes I want him to do stuff that's I need to do it because it's about my world. But sometimes I don't want to do it. So, "Would you do this?" "No, you do it." So, it's my that's my process and for me to do. But if it's something I just can't do, well, he will stop what he's doing and help me if I need help right then. So on the other things, I just try to wait until he's done focusing on what he's focusing on, and then he'll disengage from that thing, and then he'll start doing something else. And then I just wait until he's not engaged and focusing on one thing to come in and interact with him. And, knowing what these instincts are within us really is helpful. And I tell you, it has decreased the tension in my relationship by a lot, because as I start, I'm understanding that our consciousnesses and the way our hormones and all that worked, we took on different, we specialized in different areas, and the way of a female brain usually thinks is very different than the way a male, brain thinks. It's very different. That's why, most men and women aren't the same. They don't really like doing the same things. Like a man, they really like, doing things out in the physical world. They want to work on that motor, see how it works. What is this thing doing? It gets them going. They love that. Well, I don't want to know how the motor works, how this contraption goes around that and connects to that, and then it does this. I'm not interested in that. All I want to know is, can I get in that car and get to where I'm trying to go on an errand I'm trying to do or something like that? I don't want him to hand me the key. It's like, okay, you're going to turn this key in the car and then it's going to fire the ignition. It's going to do all this. And then I'll look at him and say, no, does it work? And he'll say, it works perfectly because I just fixed it. And so I get in it and off I go. And so we became a team that we work together I use my particular way my conscious works to help the whole, and he does too. So it's just, it's in that cooperation and working together, So we all have different consciousnesses here, and we all see things from our own perspective. And that's what it means to really work together and, work with these instincts that want to, everybody outside of my little world is out there. They're not invited in my world, in my space. And yeah, there's got to be some boundaries there, or your house will be full of people just, playing music and going crazy all the time. Well, especially for me, because I love people. I'm an extrovert. So, I just have these things that I do where I go out and interact and go around a bunch of people. Then I come home to my sanctuary. So, it's just all different. And then my partner's an introvert, and he doesn't, if the house was full of people every day, he would be so confused. He wouldn't know which end's up by the end of the day. So from time to time, I'll have a holiday or a birthday celebration, and we'll do it here at the house, and then he'll just deal with his stuff then, and it does cause him a little anxiety, but it's good for him to get around other people, and he does it, and we work together to help each other get through it. So I think knowing what these instincts are and knowing that we have an instinct to delineate what is okay, this is our tribe and that over there is not. And that comes from these old instincts that we still carry today, even though we don't live in that environment anymore. We're living in this environment, and this modern environment is different, and it has different challenges because we're in here bumping around with the same, instinctual, these instinctual worlds that we carry that we developed back through that, when we lived out in tribes. So it's just a matter of, trying to look at the situation a little bit deeper and going, is this an instinct I've got here that's that's not wanting me to go over there and, not wanting me to interact with that, or what's really happening there? Is it a fear? So we're multifaceted. We've got this instinctual world, we've got the inner world, we've got the outer world. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of moving parts. And I think that's why I always come back to it. It's good to find a place. And even if you're not, perfect at working toward, using your imagination, if you're not real good at it, if you're not intuitive and imaginative, then you can, work on it in another way, coming at another direction. You can, Tom's work is a big example of that. You can just start learning to use your imagination. You can just maybe sit out on a park bench and just imagine a person walking by that's not really there. You just start kind of tapping into, well, what more is here? What more can I see? What else is going on in this scene? And you want to pull back from that extreme focus and kind of just try to look at it as a whole. Okay, I'm sitting in front of the ocean. I can see the waves rolling in. And then, you can kind of close your eyes and hear the waves. And then you hear the waves rolling in. Then you can hear the seagull above you, and then you can hear the voices of the people around you talking. See, and what you're doing is you're going into, a visual space, a space where you're not thinking, and that's the thing, getting the intellect out of the way. The intellect is your thinking mind, and that is your monkey mind. You want to get that thing to slow down and chill out a little bit sometimes. We don't need to be thinking and processing all the time. We need to like sit back in that chair and enjoy where we are from time to time. It's just all of these multifacets that we, have connection to, that we're doing. And it's just a lot of different things, and welcome it. It's a challenge. And those challenge, to do this work and to look at these things and look at how our lives are with our consciousness, and just look at it. Oops, excuse me. Just look at it as a challenge. See, I've got a challenge with my dogs barking right now. And so what I'm going to do is just step over here and say, thank you for alerting me to the danger, Toby. And I'm going to let my partner take care of it, who just walked out and took care of Toby and shut my door. See? Yeah, there it is in real time, cooperating to get things done. How'd you like that one, Julia?
Just beautiful. And yeah, that's such good advice, relationship advice and meditation advice and fear work advice. So I think we have left everyone with much to ponder and some gems again. And yeah, this was great how this went off, because your experience is so cool and everybody can have their own experience in so many different ways. And
Yes.
yeah, because
Yeah.
me, it's just mostly like daydreaming, but I notice more and more, like I'll find myself just going off on these little daydreams, where everything just starts taking on a life of its own, and they're pretty fun. So this is just a fun realm that we're in, and even with all the hard lessons, there's so much joy and fun to be had. So don't miss out on that. It's just, and like Cheryl was saying earlier, whatever resonance you leave this this reality stream, this lifetime with, you'll come in with your next one. And I was just talking about that in a video yesterday that just got up today. The exact same thing you were saying almost. So another one of those things where we're all reading each other's minds. So yeah, magic is definitely in the air and things are amped up, and it's time to get in where you fit in, and you fit in at the top. Ugh.
Yeah, get in where you fit in. That's great. Um, get in where you fit in. And that brings us back to where we started, this talk about our consciousness and how all that works, and what, how we learn to get it focused. And in the beginning of the talk, we were talking about the Oracle of Delphi, and I do see myself as just like a seer. I can make the connection with the larger system. I can get information, but I would not do a divination and give someone, okay, well, this is the way it is, because I'm just interpreting the data. I don't know if it's right or not. So I don't want to give someone the wrong idea and the wrong information. But what Julie and I have been doing is we're going to something called the Errant Collective Consciousness, the ECC. We've done 2 sessions now on a Saturday morning. And what we're doing is we're just going in there for an intention to help each other. We're not going in there to see things and to get information that we don't have at the point in time. We're just going in there to assist each other. And so someone will, well, what's your intention? Well, I'm working around this area here, and I would like to, maybe be able to clarify that more. And we've had a lot of really interesting, events happen in the ECC where one seer will get the data, and then another seer will get the data, and the 2 datas match. I was seeing flames and this fiery thing, and then somebody else in the ECC saw the same fire, and we both were like, we were just getting the data, because that piece right there was just fire. And they're so much fun. I've really enjoyed doing those. And, it's not that, we're not really channeling. What we're doing is we're just tapping into the system. We're asking about that other person. We're bringing back data, and then we're telling that person, this isn't the reality. This is just what I saw. And is there anything in this bucket I've got that you could use? And then people will look in the bucket and go, wow, that's helpful. They'll take what they need, and then they leave the rest there. So it's been super helpful. I've seen that a couple of people were able to move, move their consciousness and have bigger realizations of what's actually happening around events and things and places and people that they didn't have before. So, and Julia coming in and doing this for all of us has just been spectacular. I mean, I know of quite a few people that's really been helped by the information. And then you've got the added piece of the ECC every weekend. And I think that right there is just a winning combination. And I am so glad to be a part of it. It's been super fun. So thank you, Julia.
Well, you're not just a part of it, you're the founder of it. And yeah, couldn't do it without you and your expertise. And it's just so cool. It's just, yeah, can't have enough gratitude.
We both
Yeah.
founded it. We both had that idea. We both, as soon as I said it, it resonated with you and you knew. It's like, oh, yeah, let's use our consciousness to do this. But
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. And,
go ahead.
yeah. And, just having more than one person with that same intention is so powerful. So any chance you get to do that is a good thing. And it can't
Yes.
hurt. You have to lose.
Right. Right. And as we're coming to find we have this immense power as a consciousness. So we might as well use it, right? We might as well use it for good. And, once our intentions are good, I think that the system gives you more power and gives you more energy to do more for more people, because if your intentions are good and you're just moving away from fear and into love, well, that's what this place is all about. And so it's like, oh, well, look what they're doing. Hey, let's dump some energy on it so that they can do this with more energy. And because they're bringing the love vibration in it, then they're getting together. It makes more love. And it's just having happy love tribbles, and they're not annoying. They're fun little critters to, watch run around. So, I can't wait to see what's coming in the future. And I've really enjoyed our work together, Julia. We tend to have a mind meld, and we're able to kind of communicate on the inner world really well. And that doesn't happen with me with everybody. But it has happened before with a couple of people. I can count them on one hand. So I think we've just both done a lot of inner work. We've both come to some understandings, and I think we've gotten to a place where we just, we're able to connect with people who resonate with us and who's kind of where we're at in the process. Like, okay, she knows that belief and we're reflecting all this stuff back to us. That, and I know that too. And so because we're kind of on the same little learning path there, we've gotten some of the same information that makes our resonance familiar to each other. And I'm like, wait. And when you first contacted me, we wrote each other an email the same day, same exact time, asking each other the same thing. And that was just uncanny. The odds of that is astronomical. And I just knew, it's like, okay, pay attention to that one. That's a lot of coincidences right there. So it's been really enjoyable, meeting someone like you and talking to you. And you already, you had Simplicity Revealed already kind of going. And I just started my channel just a few weeks back. So it was just perfect timing. And we're just doing what we are supposed to be doing. And we're both learning through the process too, and growing along with, everybody else that's, has come to find this place that we're in now. And I'm just looking forward to what's next. And then after that, what's next after that? And we'll just keep moving forward and help each other and, help each other in their growth. And if they get into a place where they're uncomfortable, well, we can sit there next to them while they're uncomfortable, and it's okay, and let that be, because that's what's going to help them get out of it, So I've sent out quite a few bracelets with, well, not quite a few, probably 15, 16. So that's 15, 16 people that are aware of what's going on, and they're using that bracelet to focus in the now when they're feeling uncomfortable. And just to let you know, if you're using one of the calming bracelets and then you hit a brick wall, or you feel like you're face planting, or if you're getting overwhelmed a little bit, feel free to email me and ask me questions. I've been there. I know that place. I've been there. I've camped out there. I had a 4-course meal there. I know that place. And it's not all the time, but from time to time, as you're feeling uncomfortable, that's just where you're growing at. And, it's just getting used to that uncomfortable. And then you just go to the next thing. And then you'll see, as you work forward, all of a sudden you'll get the realization, and then you'll be able to level up, and because you've processed through that pain or fear or whatever it was you was working on. So then when you do that, you can send me an email too, and I'll stand up and be cheering you on. Go, 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 get it. So feel free to email me at any point. I know that the work is, the hero's journey is not easy, but it has so many valuable things in it. It is a wonderful experience once you start to feel the love coming back into your life, and those others around you can start feeling it too. They start interacting with you in better and more beautiful ways. And then the beauty in life just starts coming back, and you start focusing there, and then you just start reveling in it, and it feels so good to be out of some of those dark uglies that we kind of hung out in for a while until we get out of it. So I'm just here. I welcome all of you, and I really appreciate all your focus and intentions of good things, and I'm glad that y'all like me when I'm talking, and I've always loved to talk. And now I have a place to do it. So thank you, Julie, and thank you for everything.
Thank you, Cheryl. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And I hope you have a great morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. And remember to stay focused on what you want and help others if you can. And we'll talk to you next time. Thanks again, Cheryl.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.